So my brother, who is basically at this point in time the unpaid intern over here at the Actual Justice Warrior YouTube channel, has been on a roll sending me videos of local news because apparently he watches local news all day, every day, just so he can get one video out here to me so that I can present it to you, and I think that you should all be grateful to him.
More and more young people say the health of our planet is causing deep concern about their futures. It's known as climate anxiety.
And today's video is no different, because that opening news clip that I just brought up with them talking about climate anxiety with the kids was the prelude to a segment that kind of praises scaring the crap out of children so that they can feel anxious about global warming, because it will inspire them to be activists like the patron saint of the climate, Greta Thunberg. Now, I've had in my possession before Anthony Fauci and Andrew Cuomo candles, but I have yet to get myself the religious symbols of the great Greta, the woman of the year, the woman of the millennium, the child with obvious learning disabilities who stopped going to school because her activist parents scared the crap out of her about climate and then used her as a prop in order to promote their political agenda.
How dare you!
But today we're going to talk about not Greta. Today we're going to talk about other kids that are being scared in your public education system to be terrified of the global warming crisis. That's definitely a crisis and is definitely the scariest thing ever, to the point where they're actually developing mental disorders because of it. And we're going to do so while watching this segment that kind of praises this practice. But before we get into this craziness, before we have a good time with lots of rhyme, we will do the sponsor transition. And yes, I totally lost my ability to speak for a second, but don't worry about it. I will regain it on the other side of this ad read. Noble Gold Investments is happy to let you know that gold is looking fantastic in 2023. And in 2022, according to longtermtrends.net, gold outperformed the S&P 500 and Bitcoin, and with record-setting inflation and all kinds of problems in the market, you need a hedge against this uncertainty, which is why I'm glad we're sponsored by NobleGoldInvestments.com. You can open up a precious metals IRA and protect your retirement, and if you actually start off with a qualifying investment, you will be gifted an American quarter-of-an-ounce gold coin that's an absolutely beautiful keepsake for your collection. Don't get sucked into the world hailing this asset or that asset as the new hedge, because if you would have went with gold and silver, you would have been the most protected in 2022. So call them at 877-646-5347 or visit them at noblegoldinvestments.com. Again, the number is 877-646-5347.
CBS 2's Vanessa Murdoch spoke with an expert about climate anxiety and a young woman who managed hers by taking action.
So the premise of this story is that young people are becoming more and more anxious, more and more worried about the so-called looming climate crisis. They're getting terrified. It's affecting their mental health. But don't worry about it, because we talked to an expert and we talked to a patient who actually became an activist in order to deal with the propaganda that has been infused into her brain to the point where she had diagnosable mental health issues. So isn't this great? Isn't this a good story? Isn't this a great local news presentation? Let's cut into the segment where we're gonna fearmonger with a bunch of images of severe weather events and whatnot.
I think it's this feeling that just like wells up in people, something that takes over your body.
Look, I have to state this clearly and concisely before I go into this part of my commentary, that I, Sean Fitzgerald, am not a doctor. I am not a medical doctor, and it is in fact a violation of my parole to perform open heart surgery in each and every state in the union. But since Puerto Rico is not a state, if you need an operation, I'll see you over there. I'm sure it will work out a-okay. Look at how steady my hands are as a surgeon. Now that we got that disclosure out of the way, I want to say this as clearly and as technically as possible. Sophia, the subject of today's video, the subject of today's local news segment, has Zoloft face. You know that thing when you're taking like antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications to the point where it's actually totally making you kind of like a zombie? I know this might not be a technical side effect or anything like that. Again, don't want to spread any medical misinformation, but sometimes you get a look on your face where you're not really fully expressive, and that has been colloquially referred to as Zoloft face, and I am not diagnosing because I'm not a doctor, but I am pointing out that this matches all the the obvious signs that one would describe when it comes to Zoloft face. I'm not saying anything, I'm not making any medical claims right here, but look for yourself.
Sophia Assab shares climate anxiety started to affect her during her senior year of high school when she enrolled in a class called Global Futures, Global Warming. The class examined what life would be like in 2050 and led her to ask big questions.
What am I doing? Like, is there going to be a future? Do I want to have kids? What am I bringing? What is this world going to look like?
So there's a lot of angles that you could come at this story with when you're presented with this information. When you hear about a girl who enrolled in a class in a public school in her senior year and then became so terrified by the propaganda presented to her in that class that she decided that she might not want to have children. That's how terrorized she was by our public education system. That's how much fear she had, not to mention the severe mental health issues that she ended up developing as a result of this class. And you could say, wow, isn't that great? She became an activist because of that. Or you could say, what the hell are we doing in our public schools that we're scaring 16 and 17-year-olds to such an extent that they actually end up needing to have medication, they actually end up needing to see a therapist, all based on the way that we're talking about global warming in the classroom. Obviously, what you should be doing if you're an actual sensible local news segment is going after the teacher, going after the curriculum, going after whoever's responsible for that class, because all joking aside, this is dead serious, and we should not be convincing kids as young as 16 or 17 to not want to have children in order to not upset Mother Gaia, the planet Earth. Oh, please be with her, the humans are the problem, let's have a socialist agenda in order to solve it.
We see this a lot in our practice.
Is there an age group that we see this most prevalent in?
I'm seeing a lot of anxiety focused on the climate in school age and adolescent kids.
Again, if this is something that's affecting school age and adolescent kids, then this is not a feel-good story about how this one girl who might be on medication based on her face, again, I'm not a doctor, not making a medical claim, just making a joke, then maybe that's not something that we should just be like, oh wow, howdy dandy, I guess that's A-okay. We should be talking about the fact that our public schools are scaring children. They're terrifying them. They're giving them more mental health issues, and considering coming back from the pandemic, mental health issues are off the chart in this country, this is likely not the direction we want to go with our education system. This is likely not what you would want the public schools to be doing to making kids more anxious instead of less anxious. They need to focus on actually being kids instead of being props for organizations in order to push things like the Green Leap Forward from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And by the way, credit to Stephen Michael Davis for coining that term, calling the Green New Deal the Green Leap Forward, because it's all about controlling the economy, not about fighting off evil global warming.
Dr. Jamie Howard with Childmind Institute says climate anxiety has become more prevalent over the last decade and is most common in those who have generalized anxiety disorder, chronic worries about everyday things.
The tone of this local news segment, totally off. The tone of this local news segment, totally ridiculous and absurd. The idea that we can just say casually, it turns out that the kids that have the most anxiety about global warming, the kids that are getting terrified the most, are kids who already have mental issues, already have issues with coping with day-to-day life. Therefore, something, let's turn them into activists, is not the proper response. What we should be pointing out is that our public school system apparently offers classes that aggravate mental disorders in our kids, and this is not something that we need to celebrate. This is not directing your anxiety into something productive. This is making you more anxious about something that is well out of your control and something that is being hyped up to the extreme in order to terrify you, and that's not a good thing. That's not what you should be on board for. I don't want a 12-year-old to be freaking out thinking that they can never have kids in the future, thinking that their whole life is over based on the propaganda. A lot of it isn't even true related to global warming.
According to the Media and Climate Change Observatory at University of Colorado Boulder, the number of television news stories on climate change or global warming increased by 85% from 2000 to 2021. Makes sense when you consider this data from Climate Central on the acceleration of billion-dollar disasters.
So this chart is saying that there's an acceleration of billion-dollar disasters. However, what it looks like to me is that there's a couple of outlier years in terms of billion-dollar disasters. Also, are we talking about just in the United States? Are we talking about worldwide? What exactly is going on here? And are all of these disasters related to extreme weather events? Or do you have earthquakes worked in there or other things that are juicing up those numbers? Because a disaster is a very broad term, and this does not appear to outline and define this properly in a way that we can all understand. And again, if you're going to make the case that the disasters are increasing since 2000, then maybe you should have all of the lines as represented by 2000. But as you can see by the average line, that has to mean that there are significantly more years where there are less disasters below that average. But they didn't want to show that because that might actually get you to think. They wanted to scare you. But even when you're scared by these, even when you're terrified by it, what you can actually realize is that 2020 seems to be the peak of the lines that are presented to us. Then 2021 is a decline, and then 2022 is an even more significant decline. So it looks like we're actually declining in disasters, at least over the past 3 years. But hey, what do I know? This chart is clearly shown to us in such a way to generate some kind of reaction that's supposed to make you terrified, and I'm not terrified, so I'm looking at it logically, which you're definitely not supposed to do. Remember, they show this kind of thing to babies in K-12 education system who have mental health disorders, and then say, wow, aren't they inspirational, when they start freaking out and basing their mental health disorders on the thing we're trying to scare them with.
Some teenagers will say, like, why even apply to college? What's it matter?
Some teenagers will say, why even apply to college? Why does it matter? Stop doing what you're doing. If your teenager's saying that, stop propagandizing them. Stop telling them that the world's going to end in 12 years, 10 years, or whatever. It's going to be okay. We're going to have technological advancements in order to deal with this. On top of that, we already have a carbon-free energy source that actually works. It's called nuclear energy, and you could actually have these kids become advocates for nuclear energy rather than you just say, oh, it's so endearing that these kids think that they have no future, and we scared them to the point where they don't even want to apply and go to college or pursue anything.
If your child suffers from climate anxiety, Dr. Howard offers this helpful solution.
What we want to encourage kids to do is to take action.
Do something to reduce the perceived threat.
Yeah, so this therapist, I just want to say this, and I want to make this 100% clear, is absolutely worthless, garbage, and terrible as a person. If you're dealing with kids that say that they feel like they have absolutely no future due to the fact that you've propagandized them to believe that they have no future, you've generated anxiety in them, and you say, you know what will fix your anxiety? Becoming an annoying global warming activist. You're a bad therapist. You deserve to have your license revoked. What happened to do no harm? You're not meant to be an activist, but it just goes to show you that these people have infected each and every one of our institutions. It's one of the reasons why I don't care so much for the argument that what we need in our K-12 system is more mental health professionals, because a lot of times what you get are people like this who inflame mental disorders, feed into them, and actually make the whole situation worse. If my kid came to me, my future kid, somewhere out there in the future, and said, I'm scared that the global warming is going to come into my house and kidnap me and bring me and put me in a sack, and then that's where I'm going to live the rest of my life, I would smack him across the face. Not that I support hitting your kids, but you know, in certain instances, you got to make an exemption and say, hey kid, shut up, you stupid. Go watch Batman. Stop paying attention to that. Don't worry about it. We're going to be okay. The world's not going to end in 12 years. Believe me, they've been giving me the global warming tipping point ever since I was 5 years old. I've noticed it, and we passed 1 million of them, and guess what they do each and every time? They reset the tipping point in order to push for new legislation, because that's what they always do.
In November, climate activist Greta Thunberg appeared on BBC's The One Show and says taking action worked for her.
For me, it helped to do something concrete.
She started school strikes for climate. Connecting with like-minded people also helped.
Who share the same values as you, because when you're together in this struggle, then there are no limits to what you can accomplish.
So I, like a good conservative, hate Greta Thunberg. I've always hated her when she was a kid, hate her now that she's over the age of 18, and I hate, more importantly, her parents, who again are environmentalist activists that indoctrinated her knowing her mental disabilities, and again, this is stuff that the mother wrote about in the book, and just so that they could have a child activist that looks so cute advocating for climate change. If you scare your mentally ill kid to the point where she doesn't want to go to school, you're a bad parent. You're not a hero. We shouldn't be celebrating your kid or anything like that. Nobody cares what Greta has to say. She's anti-nuclear. All these global warming crazy people are all about ending capitalism, not actually having a low carbon energy source, which just goes to show you they care more about controlling your life than the issue with climate. I've broken down the numbers over and over again. I've compared France to Germany over and over again. If you go nuclear, guess what? You can have carbon-free energy. You can actually address what the alleged problem is, but none of these people actually want to do it.
Sophia Assab says that's exactly how she managed her own anxiety. In college, she co-founded a webinar series, Generation MAD, which focused on conversations about climate.
Talk about this, like just have it out in the open.
Those conversations helped her heal. Today, she works as an environmental, social, and governance consultant.
She started a website and does a webinar, and she grifts off of this in order to fight back against her anxiety, which we instilled in her in the public school system. So isn't this a great and wholesome story? Here's some footage of some child labor, some kids picking up trash, and also here's some footage of some turtles going out to sea. Now, this is actually quite interesting because one of the funniest climate-related stories is when they carpet bombed with solar panels all over the desert. You actually had these climate people have to move a bunch of tortoises out of the way because it turns out that putting all that glass and heavy metals all over the desert actually has negative impacts on the animal life. So thank you for showing me this, because this actually shows me what's being harmed by your agenda. But yeah, I'm so happy that we scared the crap out of this girl to the point where she takes medication and she's now a climate grifter. Look, every time I do a story related to the public school system, people say, oh, well, you know what? Homeschool your kids. Put your kids in private school. Get your kids out of the public school system. And that might be great for you. That might be great for your kid. But the thing is, they are training activists in our K through 12 education system. And the majority of people can't afford to take their kids out of the schools and send them to private schools. They don't have the time to do homeschooling. So what you're going to do is raise your kids well, smart, and all that. They're not going to be panicking over the ever-moving global warming tipping point. But guess what? They're going to get outvoted each and every time when they go to the ballot box by all the kids that were indoctrinated. This is why everyone, and I mean absolutely everyone, whether you have children or don't, or whether your kids are in private school, homeschool, or in the public schools, needs to fight back against this. This is not a wholesome segment. This is not a good thing. It's not a good thing to make people believe that they aren't going to be able to have kids at age 16, terrify them to the point where they need to see a therapist that's going to tell them to go become an activist in order to fight back against global warming. This will have negative downstream effects, and while we might have some victories fighting these people off, while maybe we could get some kind of legislation passed today, if people see the light and go towards nuclear energy, in the future, we're going to deal with a voting bloc that hates nuclear energy because they think it's scary and thinks that global warming is coming into their room, breaking through their windows, and is about to kidnap them. Basically, global warming to these kids is Batista from that M. Night Shyamalan trailer, a knock at the cabin in the woods in the middle of the night, and you gotta pick between your gay lover or your adopted Asian daughter.
Will you make a choice?
That's not the world I want to live in. That's not the world that you should want to live in. But hey, those are just my thoughts. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show them by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content by hitting the subscribe button. You can follow me on all my social medias by clicking the links in the description box and then following me on all my social media. Support me via the support links. Thank you so much to all of you who have. This has been me talking about the introducing of global warming anxiety. Till next time.